One of the most used debate tactics that I have seen on the internet is when a progressive asks you to define a term, and if you can't define it, then that means that clearly you're wrong and you don't know what you're talking about. But in reality, knowledge doesn't work like that. So people have knowledge that they can explain and they can express, but we also have a certain level of intrinsic knowledge. When you know that something works, but you can't really articulate how. Like, for example, not everyone knows how electricity works or where it comes from, but they know that if they put a socket into the wall, it's going to turn out the device. Like, just because they can't explain what electricity is, or just because they can't explain why you shouldn't poke with a iron nail into the socket, doesn't mean that they're wrong. So why do progressives constantly try to get upset when someone talks about the woke ideology? Because as you notice, you're not allowed to give it a name. Like, if you call it, for example, cultural Marxism, they will say that that is a conspiracy theory that's anti-Semitic. If you call it woke ideology, they will say, well, that's not a thing that exists. If you call it critical race theory, same thing. Like, you're not allowed to give it a name. And the most recent example is in an interview where Bethany Mandel found herself struggling to define woke during an appearance on Hill TV. And some people on Twitter were obviously upset about this, saying that woke is now a slur. It's akin to calling it the N-word, right? Like, this is the same that they did with the expression cultural Marxism. It's like anti-Semitic. In other words, it's so dangerous that if you use it, you risk getting fired. So, why do they do this? Well, it's pretty much like in the wild, you have animals that camouflage themselves to escape predators. So you can have a butterfly that sits on a tree and its wings look exactly like that tree branch and you can't see it. But there's another way that animals camouflage themselves. The zebra, for example, right? Like, the zebra has a black and white stripe. It doesn't camouflage with the environment. But when it's in the herd, it camouflages with the other zebra so that the lion, with its vision, has a difficult time zeroing in on a zebra. And this is what the woke do, right? Like, they co-opt various ideologies. Like, they try to wokeify entertainment, movies, video games, politics. And they have a set of worldviews and buzzwords and concepts that they use in order to subvert that thing and get it to stop producing the thing that it does produce in order to promote more wokeness. So, for example, they will infest Gillette, right? And now Gillette, instead of focusing on making good razors, is now going to produce wokeness through its advertising. That's what it does. And most people, they cannot really articulate what's happening, but the moment you hear expressions like white privilege is a product of systemically racist societal structures, you're like, oh, okay, so that's woke, right? Because, like, you heard it in another place before. Like, before seeing it in that movie, you maybe heard it from Gillette. And you make the connection. But the progressives do not want you to make this connection, because when you make the connection, it means that you can criticize or attack their ideology. Like, you can point out, well, Gillette, like, you're saying this and this, but, if you're part of this ideology, you must also believe this and this. And this has been criticized, debunked, right? They don't want you to do that. They want you to believe that these things are happening grassroots, that they're natural, organic, it's just happening that people from these various institutions just happen to think alike because this is the normal way of thinking. And in reality, you have, like, the normal way of thinking and you have the far right. There's no other in between. So that is why they don't want you to criticize it. But the question becomes, like, what is woke? Like, what is the definition of woke? And the most concise definition, which I have come across, is the belief that society is split into oppressor and oppressed groups, defined by race, class, gender, and other factors. These distinctions are backed by a larger power structure that those in privilege are likely to be unaware of. As such, the lived experience of marginalized people must be heeded in order to uproot such injustice. So, to summarize, they believe that there is a conspiracy between the people in power, which are the cisgender straight white men, And these people are conspiring without knowing that they're conspiring with each other. Like, this is what Robin DiAngelo writes in her book. This is what I'm saying, that the most far radical right winger that's batshit crazy and insane is still more sane than the mainstream leftist thought. Because again, like, they believe that the entire society is conspiring with each other without knowing that they're conspiring with each other in order to oppress minorities. And the only way we can know this is through the subjective interpretation and the subjective opinions of activists. So you can't quantify it. You can't know if you have like a policy where you're saying, all right, well, let's ban wolf whistling from the streets, right? You don't know like how effective that is, like by how percentage is it lowering actual rape and violence. You don't know any of that. But like, they move on with it anyway, right? It's astonishing, isn't it? Like, this worldview exists because people don't stop to analyze it and people don't read the dogma, right? Like, usually they have like two versions: a version for the smart people, for the academia, and a version for the dumb people that's dumbed down. But anyway, another definition of wokeness, which is very effective, is the Chinese political scientist by the name, I hope I don't mispronounce it, Chen Zhang. He describes it as Baizuo. Now, Baizuo is something that I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys know, but it means those who come across with an overtly concern for refugees, LGBT rights, and environmental issues without knowing or addressing more pressing social and political matters. In their misguided activism, they may also give themselves an exaggerated sense of moral superiority. So this is what woke is. You can use either of these two definitions. They're very good. The definition of Baizuo, I think, is very accurate because you get a third party looking in. And the other definition is also very powerful, right? So you have people who believe that society is spread into the oppressor-oppressed class. And this is done by the people in power conspiring with each other without being aware that they are doing this. And the only way to expose this is by having the subjective opinions of activists through their what is called lived experiences. And as I concluded, by acknowledging and defining woke, we open the door to genuine examination of the worldview that lies beneath the surface of various social and political movements. Only then can we engage in meaningful dialogue and, when necessary, offer valid critiques. Because otherwise, you cannot criticize something that you can't define, right? So let me know what you guys think, and as usual, I will see you in the comment section.